Hey, Missy, it's
Hello,
Sean. Hi.
you.
How am I? I'm trying to stay
Yeah.
positive. I'm not doing a very good job of it.
Well, I hope it gets better. Where are you at right now?
California.
No way. Where?
I'm over. I want to say I'm within 50 miles of Los Angeles.
Oh, you're so lucky. I've never been to the West Coast ever.
I used to live here. I lived in Huntington Beach in 1993.
Where? You've been to Virginia, right? Where were you at in Virginia?
Well, at first I stopped in Richmond. There was a lady there who needed to see her family. They wouldn't accept her because they're very hardcore Christian. She left their house when she was under the age of 18. She left because she was a lesbian, and then she got pregnant, and her she moved out of an abusive relationship in with a guy in Richmond, Virginia, who after being there just a couple of weeks, he expected sexual favors, even though she'd already paid for her and her son to be there. So I was in Richmond, Virginia for, I want to say, a day. And then,
You're a good friend.
well, I didn't even hardly know the lady. I mean, she was somebody that I had heard about through a mutual contact in Boulder. I think her name was Rachel. But the terms for, see, I went real hardcore anti Christian on her parents because of how Christian they are. I used a bunch of Bible verses and a bunch of that kind of crap to get them to understand what it is that I was saying. I let them know that she's not a lesbian and she has a kid. They didn't even know that.
Wow, really?
Really. When I went to Virginia, it was to rescue three different people. My friend Mahalia, who she was already on an airplane to Boulder by the time I was on the ride to Virginia, and then Natalie, I knew, and she was suicidal, and then Mahalia was in the same situation as Rachel. And I don't know that her name was Rachel. It was Rachel or Rebecca or something like that. But Mahalia, she moved out of an abusive relationship with her kid, moved in with a guy who was supposed to be a friend, and he was expecting a blowjob after 2 weeks. So she's like, Sean, I gotta get the fuck out of here, and I helped her get the fuck out of there. Well, I
That's
didn't.
so awesome. So what did Natalie really pay that? Get that dude to do that? Like, is that like the true story?
Honestly, I don't know. I know that the way that I was trying to get myself killed, I'd been trying to get somebody to shoot me in the head for over a year. I offered everything that I had
Do
for
that. I
somebody to
don't
do
want you
that.
to.
A lot of people don't want me to, but my quality of life sucks. I mean, when I go to, like right now, I'm at a lady's house who I barely know. I met her over the internet after Natalie died. And she's got her own struggles. I mean, she's got a family who's got a lot of issues that, uh, well, thank goodness my parents didn't have to deal with. As far as my autism goes, I'm not one of the violent types. I'm not one of the ones who can't speak. I'm not one of the ones who needs that kind of care. But there are a lot of parents out there who have kids that are autistic that are like that. And then there's the whole family dynamics. And then, of course, when you're a male in a household and there's a female who has a boyfriend, there's usually situations that arise from that are unpleasant. And although I don't have to deal with that, it's always a possibility that I have to keep in the forefront of my mind.
Yeah. Is her family still bugging you?
Natalie's,
Yeah.
no, they're that's the issue is that they needed to come forward. All of this happened because they didn't want to be honest. And
Her
now
sister?
now that it's not happening to them, it's fine for them to walk away after the destruction of my entire life over their lives, over them not being willing to tell the truth. Her sister as well, yeah. See, that's the thing.
Wow.
Me and Natalie were friends, but her sister didn't want us to be friends. Her and Natalie were fighting over a boy while I was in Virginia. I found that out on my birthday, and that's the last time I saw Natalie. Um, That was on my birthday in 2016, and I got my car stuck outside of her house. I want to say the 22nd or 23rd of October. I don't know exactly for certain though, but I know that I didn't
And
get to
she
see her
asked
that
you to
day.
come out there, didn't she?
Do what?
She asked you to come out there, right?
Uh, Actually, it was a planned trip before she ever left Colorado. We planned the trip. Me, her, Alicia,
Wow.
and Maddie Boa. Um,
Yeah, I don't know the Maddie girl. I've seen Alicia, but I don't know the Maddie girl.
she's one of Alicia's ex-girlfriends. She's the meth
Oh
dealer
wow.
in Boulder that was having people assault me over what happened in Virginia. Maddie
I'm
Boa.
sorry that people did that to you.
Well, you didn't do it. The
I
real
know, but
issue
I
is
just
that
hate it. Like you're a good person. It hurts my heart to know that. I don't like it.
I don't like it either. That's why I want it to stop. A lot of people say don't talk about suicide, and that's the worst part is that I'm suicidal because I need somebody to listen. And when I tell them that I'm suicidal and they brush me off, it shows me they're not going to listen. One guy who knows a lot about what's been going on, he doesn't want to come forward because there's a young woman that we both know who, well, he wants to make her happy, and that's more important than the truth. So he's like, I'm not going to help you because you asked me to help you kill yourself. I'm like, dude, I asked for your help for almost a year before I asked you to help me kill myself.
Yeah, I mean, you need a friend. You need someone to genuinely be there for you. I was telling my boyfriend about you and how good of a person you were. He wanted me to tell you that
Did he what?
that he said hello.
Well, tell him I said hello too.
I will.
The last time I
You have
talked to
people.
you, do what?
I said you have people that care.
Yes, ma'am. I just can't get them to come together. I mean, all these people who saw this harassment against me on the internet, they didn't get a hold of anyone. Like, all right, Natalie's family, they had a lot of bikers who got involved and a lot of really messed up mentally individuals who got involved. And,
Oh,
basically they were all involved in threatening, harassing, and intimidating myself and all my friends until my friends went crazy. I mean, a lot of them were like, dude, fucking, I stuck up for you and all I got was fucking threatened. I'm like, dude, I wasn't the one that was threatening you. I told you that these
I
people were
don't
doing this
understand how they can go do that to homeless people. I mean,
because nobody cares. Nobody cares about the homeless rights until they're homeless. And by then, of course, it's too late.
oh my gosh, I wish I went all the way across the world because I would with anything you needed, I would help you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, mostly what I
Honestly, I want
needed.
to move. I want to move out of the East Coast. It's drowning in heroin over here.
See, that's the problem with Colorado. It's drowning in heroin and meth, just like the whole United States. In 2003,
Yep,
the Juggalos came into Boulder with their cheap heroin, and it hasn't left.
yep, that's how it is. I live real close to Baltimore, and that's the heroin capital of the country, and it's bad.
It is. Well, Baltimore, we have major naval yards in Maryland. We have a lot of
Yep.
major inlets. We have a lot of ways for the drugs to get in, and we have a government that seems, well, like they're not interested. Like
Oh,
the
they
heroin,
want the drugs here because it's making them so much money.
it does make a lot of money. But the other
It
thing is,
does
it
with the
creates,
rehab. They make a lot of money
yes,
in
ma'am,
the jail system. Ugh.
the
You
jail
know, I've
system's the
lost.
worst.
Maryland's like one of the worst states for overdoses. And is like the in the top five. I've lost so many of my friends. I mean, I barely have anyone left. They're all dead.
Per capita, California, or per capita, Colorado has one of the highest suicide rates in the nation, but they're dead last as far as mental health care goes. Dead last. They're 50th in the nation.
Do you have health care? That's all fine for you?
No, I don't anymore. All of that got taken away without having an address and with having warrants out for me.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. They took it all.
But you're homeless. That should be given to you.
Well, the thing is, I earned everything before I injured my back. I earned my stuff, So I don't really.
Yeah.
see where the issue was with all of that, but people were too busy judging me because I was still homeless no matter how hard I worked. It's because one person earning minimum wage isn't going to earn enough to even keep a roof over their head,
No,
let alone the first and
no way.
last month's rent and deposit and having to feed yourself, you know? I
Yeah,
mean, it,
it's hard. A few years ago, I got my own apartment, and it was income based, but I could do it by myself. Then I got with the wrong guy back then, and I ended up, he was on drugs and I wasn't, and he ended up taking all my money, and then I lost everything because of him.
yes, ma'am, that happens a lot.
Yeah, he
Uh,
was beating on me real bad. I was on life support twice, and it was a really hard. He was beating me in front of my son, which my son is not his, so he didn't really care. And he tried to drown my son in the bathtub when he was 2, while I was at work. It was really hard to get over it.
that's my issue with Jamie up there in South Dakota.
I saw your
She's not
video about her.
necessarily as strong as you are. Yeah, I
Yep,
love
I got
Jamie.
away from that. I would not let my son. I would not let my son be around that anymore.
You know, there was a time where you wouldn't have heard the word cunt out of my face. That's one of the most vile words that I know of, and nearly every
It is.
woman that I've ever known to go through abuse has had to endure that word over and over and over again while they're being
Absolutely.
abused. I
I
ended
did.
up,
I know I did.
yes, ma'am. I use that word for when I get abused or when somebody I care about gets abused. If you can't come
You
forward and
should.
be honest, I'm going to use that word, you know? Not you in
Yeah.
specific.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Kind of like if a guy does it, like a guy doesn't take the word cunt as offensively as a woman does. And women don't tend to
Exactly.
take the term bitch as offensively as men do. So I am sexist as far as which one that I use. They're not universally interchangeable. But at the same time,
Exactly.
I did call Tim Beeson a cunt.
That's Natalie's ex, right?
One of them, yes ma'am. She has an ex named Cash, and he's the one who branded her. He's a meth addict. I know a lot of Natalie's exes. And then there's the Joey Moreno guy. I know a Joey Moreno. The Joey Moreno that she was dating is not the same one that I know, though.
Oh, okay. And so her dad was molesting her?
Yes, ma'am. Her dad actually,
Wow.
see, that's the thing. When I say it's my fault that Natalie died, I exposed her dad for a reason. I was getting treated like a child molester and a rapist for raping or molesting Natalie or her sister, because nobody was specific. The only thing they were specific about is that it was some girl in Virginia, and it came out of Maddie's mouth. Maddie Bowe was the one that told them. I'm like, fuck,
Wow.
these guys are all on methamphetamines. They're all coming after me. They're not hearing me. They're
That's
just getting
scary.
abusive. It is scary. It's
That's
even
very scary. I
scarier.
mean, when people are on meth, they're crazy.
Exactly. And that's what I've had to deal with every time I go to Boulder. And the problem with that is that most of the people that I know are in Boulder. Most of my friends, my entire life for an entire decade was in Boulder. You know?
You
A
don't
lot.
have to go back, do you?
I have warrants in Colorado. I do have to go back. And that's the biggest issue that I'm having is that I shouldn't have had any warrants. I shouldn't have had to break the law in order to try to get them to take a look at the threats that have happened against me. Like,
Yeah.
I threatened to take Natalie's mother and her sister to court over this, and they pretended like I
Yeah.
threatened to kill them. And then they put that down on my court paperwork. The police didn't bother to look at any of it. They just believe whatever they're told and refuse to look at anything that I have to produce or show them. And unless I can
That's
get
not
somebody
right.
else, exactly. But without somebody else willing to go in with me in person, it doesn't happen. My friend Peaches, she
Yeah.
was going to go in with me, and we actually went down twice to try to get it done. The first time they wouldn't have us, and the second time they were closed. Um, but she actually went down there with me when I finally went down to talk to the ones in Longmont, when it ended up being Officer Amanda Jonas from Longmont, and then the Secret Service was there, and I guess a couple of those guys were from the FBI, and then Officer Brian Valenzuela is from Sheridan, which is Arapahoe County, which is also where Alicia lives. So now I'm supposed to be on probation in Arapahoe County, And I don't think so. When all that stuff went
Yeah,
down
no
in
way.
Virginia, I drove 1,700 miles away from them to get away from that bullshit. I knew what heroin did, and I know what pretty girls are up to when they know they can get away with something. And I know how easy it is for somebody like that to try to pass everything off onto somebody else. So I left that
Yeah,
situation, and it
I don't
followed me
blame
to
you. I mean,
Colorado.
that's awful.
It is.
I've I really, gosh, I'm gonna plan a trip. I really am. It's almost tax time, so I'll have money and I'm come out there. I really am, like soon, within the next probably 3 months, and see what I can do to help you.
Yes, ma'am. Is that Colorado or California?
Wherever you're at the time.
That's an awful lot of investment. For a lot of the places.
Well, that'll be all right. I mean, I don't know about how taxes and stuff work over there, but in Maryland, being a single mother, I usually get just under $10,000 back in taxes every year. So I'll be able to make the trip.
Yes, ma'am. You know, a lot of the folks who helped me out, they said that they wouldn't hold their help against me. That it wasn't something that I should feel like I owe them. And then when things didn't happen the way that they wanted it to, they rubbed it in my face that they gave me money or they provided this or they provided that. And like, I shouldn't have had to have them provide any of that. That $705 a month disability that I had, I was in housing in Nebraska. I had to choose between housing in Nebraska where I didn't have any friends and my life sucked, or going to Ken and Leah's in Colorado, and I chose Ken and Leah's house. Um, when Natalie
Well,
disappeared, I could have still gone back and actually rented that place in Chapel. I still could have gone back at that point, but because the assault by the Boulder Police Department, it prevented me from leaving state, prevented me from establishing myself, prevented me from getting out of a state where I am. The abuse that I endured in that state, nobody should have to go through. And the fact that they kept on
no,
making me
not
go
at all.
back, and it cost me all of my money to keep going to all of their fucking appointments for things that they did to me. And I literally could not get an officer to take my report. I couldn't get the autism lady to listen or to take my report. The lady who was supposed to be my victim's advocate or whatever, I literally never got one. And the lady
What the hell?
they thought should be my victim's advocate over the Natalie case was actually Natalie's family's victim's advocate. And then that group wanted me to jump through a bunch of hoops that they had pre-set up in their own minds that are supposed to help me. And I'm like, whoa, hold on, guys. See, I still need an advocate. No, we provided you with one. No, you didn't. And that was
What's the advocate supposed to do for you?
do what?
What was the advocate supposed to do for you?
Help me to not get railroaded the way that I was. Basically, the police can entrap you, and if you have disabilities like mine, they can do so pretty easily, and they do because they can get away with it. So there's supposed to be a court-appointed special advocate for people like me, but there's paperwork that you have to do in order to get that advocacy. And I had the paperwork, but the paperwork was overdue by the time I got it. I had a lady who was going to let me use her P.O. box in Nebraska, which sucked because I wasn't even sure if I was going to be allowed in Nebraska. And by the time I finally was able to, she didn't answer her door for 2 weeks. When I finally got that paperwork, it I needed help first of all because I shut down because there is so much to do that one person cannot possibly do it all, and all of it costs money. Meanwhile, I don't have the money to feed myself. I can't order my hospital records. I have nowhere to send my hospital records. The lady that I was supposed to have it sent to in South Dakota, she did a whole bunch of work that I later found out that she hadn't actually done the work. She just pretended to. And the worst part about that is that that lady in Montana was supposed to teach me how to do that so that I wouldn't be dependent on her to do it. But she wouldn't. Her and her mom treated me like trash. But that's also based on the fact that Lana was expecting sexual favors when I got there.
From
And
you?
Yeah, well, she thought that, yeah, her temporary penis. His name was Bradley Dollinger, with a D, not a B. He went back to Maryland and sold his car to a pawn shop there, and they wanted me to buy that car from the pawn shop and forget about my car, even though my car had evidence in it. And my car was already mine. It was already paid off. It was, I just needed to get to it. And they weren't understanding of that at all. And my second day up there, Lana wanted to have sex because I was crying, and I don't get that. If I'm crying, I'm not trying to get sex. I'm emotionally screwed up. Is
Yeah,
someone blowing
that's
a kazoo?
awful. I mean, you've got so much going on. That's the last thing that you're concerned about.
Exactly. And when I went up to Montana, I already knew that Lana was like that. I was dependent entirely upon Miss Jerry to have time to speak with me, and she did. She spent 2 days at Lana's house talking to Lana at the table about some dude named Dutch, who is an earthquake specialist guy. And like, I can't talk to her because at that point I have to talk to her in front of Lana and explain all the stuff that's going on with Lana. Meanwhile, Lana isn't going to allow me to speak at all if she's in the room. So it's difficult for me because then Miss Jerry was like, "Well, I spent 2 days there to help you." I'm like, "You spent 2 days there talking to Lana, you know?" And after I left there, she accused me of attacking her daughter because I was begging them to shoot me. I was begging them to kill me. If you're not going to listen to me, please kill me because I just invested all of my time and resources into believing you. And these people
Yeah,
stole evidence. I mean, they outright lied to me the day before I left there. They're like, "Oh, you don't need to take all that stuff, Sean. You're going to be coming back." I'm like, "Well, I'd like to take it all because I'm going to court. I might need it." They're like, "Oh no, just
yeah,
leave it here. Just leave it here." They wanted to give me the impression that I'd be coming back when they already knew otherwise. But also the way that it all played out, it's real difficult for me to believe that they would do that the way that they did. It's a lot easier for me to believe that Natalie's family got a hold of them and threatened them, and I made it easy for them. I gave Danica and Rochelle Miss Jerry's number and Lana's number, you know, thinking that these people were good people, but they've shown me since that they're not. And I
you have
really
such bad luck with people, with the way people treat you. I would never do that to you. So you don't have to worry about that. I would never do anything like that to you. That's so shitty.
well, you've been through a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about where Lana and Amanda didn't, not ever. And Miss Jerry, she's ended up with a lot of shitty situations, and she always tells me about how she did it all herself. And I always remind her that I helped her move 7 times. I'm like, "You didn't move yourself by yourself, Miss Jerry. Matter of fact, most of the
Everybody
time,
needs a little help.
right?" A lot of people keep telling me, one example that I used earlier, because a guy was saying that, you have to do it yourself. And I gave him the example of,
Yeah, I
let's
saw
say
your
you're at
video.
school.
Yep.
If you're at school, right, and you're getting bullied at school because you're not the attractive kid, he was like, "Oh, well, there's always things that you can do. Like you can do homeschooling, or you can move, or you can this, or you can do that." And I'm
You
like,
shouldn't have to.
right. Well, it's not just the fact that you shouldn't have to, it's the fact that if you're a kid in school, you're dependent on your parents. If your parents won't homeschool you, then you're SOL. If they're not willing to move, you're SOL. And then you have to believe that if you move, that human nature wherever you move to isn't going to be human nature. People are mean
Mhm.
to people that they don't find physically attractive, and those are the people that they blame everything on. And then there's the ones that they find physically attractive, and the physically attractive people can do no wrong in their minds because they're physically attractive. "Oh, she looks like a china doll. She could never do anything so evil or so wrong. She just looks sweet and innocent." And meanwhile,
Usually those are the ones who are the most mean.
exactly. And
I
that,
remember in my high school, the pretty popular girls were the meanest bitches in the whole school.
yeah, that's how it is pretty much everywhere. you're either one of the pretty people or you're one of the people that they pick on.
Oh, it's always one that they picked on, that's for sure.
Yes, ma'am. But the other thing is that the pretty people, the popular people, they stick together. They're popular, and then you got all the dorks who want to be popular, who will do whatever the pretty people say. So then you've got a bunch of dorks who are running around making fun of the other dorks. Like seriously, that's like a black man calling another black man the N word because he wants to hang out with white people. Why the hell would you want
Exactly.
to?
Yep. Well, when I can help you, and I will when I get my taxes. I promise you. I'm not gonna rub it in your face. I would never bring that up and make you feel like shit about that. Never.
Well, the main thing I need is some help getting a lawyer, and I need people that, whether they're out of state or not, I need them to try to find the parts where I've been harassed on the internet or the things that were said about me in a lot of those Natalie
Oh, I
groups.
can do that for sure.
I need them to make a report. That Cara Miles lady, she made her report from Texas. So if she can make it from Texas, then any officer who's going to say it's out of jurisdiction, his name should be written down and he should be put on the wall of shame.
Absolutely. So how can I do that from Maryland? Just call them?
You can call them. Um, you can also email them, I guess. I've been trying to figure out how to do that and having no luck though. So I there's other web addresses that I can find the address. I can type it in there and it sends it. But for some odd reason, the police officers theirs just doesn't seem to work.
And it's
Um,
the Boulder Police, right?
the Boulder Police Department, the Arapahoe County, also Longmont, and
Yeah, you'll have
Larimer
to message
County.
all of them because I'll call every single one.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I can. Did I send you my email address?
No.
All right. Well, I have a lot of evidence. I'd like to, just in case I get arrested. See, I didn't have copies of my evidence. That's what I've been trying to get. Um,
I'll
so
keep them for you.
yes, ma'am. Well, I'll type you my email address. That way you have it. I'll anything that you send me or whatever, I'll keep. But I'll try to send you as much information as I can. I mean, I've got, like I said, I've got over 8,000 screenshots. It'll take me a full day just to send them all. And I've
Well,
probably got
make sure you
easily
do that. 'Cause
8,000
you can
more.
count on it. I won't lose it, and I'll take care of it.
Yes, ma'am. You know, I didn't even learn how
So
to do
how
that until recently.
what screenshots?
Yeah, Katie Cahill taught me how to take screenshots on my computer just maybe 2 weeks ago at most.
Oh wow, yeah, it took me a little while. I was really late with learning those.
Yeah, trying to explain to them youngins that I like they got all these expectations like Sean, all you have to do is I'm like, hey, I didn't grow up with that stuff from when I was 3 years old.
How old are you?
38.
Wow, I just turned 27 in November.
So you're old as shit. I'm younger than you are.
Don't say that.
That's a terrible
I
joke.
feel old. I feel like I'm in my 80s.
I don't know if I feel that old, but I know that my legs don't want to work right and my back is in excruciating pain all the time. And I'm not, a man is not allowed to have pain. He's not allowed to have any emotions except
Exactly.
for anger. And it's kind of
And
sad to me.
that's not right.
It's not. A woman's emotions are emotions and she's allowed to have them, but a man's emotions are drama and he's not allowed.
You're definitely right. I wish my dad didn't do that, but that's the way he taught my brothers.
Yeah. Well, that's the America that
And
we
now I
live in.
can't stand either one of my brothers. Both of my brothers are heartless assholes. I don't even have a family. I haven't seen my family in a long time.
I saw my family for the first time together in probably over 30 years. I think the last time that I saw my aunts and uncles and all them together, I was about 6 or 7, and I was on a home leave. That was the year my uncle lit some cats on fire. He tied their tails together for the 4th of July, threw them over a clothesline, and lit them on fire.
In front of you?
Yep.
Oh my god. Did he get in trouble?
Nope.
Where were your parents?
My dad was in prison for 38 counts of cocaine possession with intent to sell, and my mom was doing a line of blow with my little brother's dad.
So where did you grow up?
In the system in Colorado.
Oh my gosh.
Group homes, foster
I know
homes, places like that.
I saw that you said that you got abused in the system over there. Happens all the time.
It does. Actually, I was
That's
in
so
the
sad.
temporary foster care system. You're only allowed 2 weeks per foster home. You can't go to the same foster home twice. And I was in it for 2.5 years for just one stint in it. So if you do the math on that, that's over 70 foster homes.
I don't know how they don't get exposed the foster care system for how shitty and what happens under their watch.
Well, they've done a few things on the news about it, but really people just don't care. They care more about dancing dolphins and building border walls to keep immigrants in.
Yeah.
And I do mean keep immigrants in because you can't keep them out. There's no way in hell. They already dug holes underneath
Yeah,
the 2 existing walls.
exactly. Yeah, they're never gonna be able to keep them out ever. That's for sure.
I also noticed that most of the Mexicans that I know are keeping our economy afloat. I mean, it's the fact that
Yeah,
they work together as a family and are able to conserve money and purchase things with purchasing power that makes America the wonderful place that it is. One of the guys I worked with at Cheesecake Factory, there were 7 of them who moved here all at once. And at first, they all got jobs. And the very first person to get a vehicle was the oldest, their grandpa. And then they started a business, and grandpa drove everybody around. And then grandma got a vehicle, and grandpa's job was to drive the boys around because they started a landscape business. And grandma's job was to drive the girls around because they started a cleaning business. And then every 3 months, like clockwork, because they're all working and they're all working together, every 3 months they're buying a brand new vehicle outright with cash because they're all pooling together to do it. Whereas white
yeah. They
people,
they work harder than most Americans. That's for sure. I'll give them that. Most of them they work very hard.
and they work smart too. I mean, I know a lot of people that aren't that good at workers who are from south of the border,
Yeah.
but they're really good at working together. Like, you don't have to work at a super, super fast pace when you've got 5 people doing the work. And then there's
Exactly.
like the way that I see white society, and I do call it white society instead of European society or American society because it is primarily white people that do it, but it's where you have to do it all yourself. You teach them they have to do it all themselves. And then you've got this car that you get this you're paying for it for 4 years, and by the time you've got it paid off, you've paid 3 times what the car's sticker price was, and your
Yeah,
car's
and the
already falling
car's so
apart.
worn down, and you've got to fix all the stuff on it because you've been driving it for so long.
Yep. Meanwhile, if you and your family had worked together, you get your dad a car first, then you get your mom a car first, and then whoever is the oldest sibling gets one beyond that, and you work your way down the line. The problem with white folks is that, like, most of the people that I work with are white. So I work with them, we make a deal. I'll do something in exchange for, and then I fulfill my end of the obligation, but they don't fulfill theirs, or they change it up. It's kind of like when you say, "Hey, I tell you what, if you do some landscaping for me and help me set up my backyard, I'll give you the old Plymouth that I got sitting next to the garage. It runs, it's fine, it passes emissions, it just needs plates and somebody to drive it." And then you do all of that work and you do a really good job because you want to earn this car. You want to be proud of yourself for having this car and not feel like it was just given to you out of pity. And then you get all that work done and they hand you a bike that's got a rim missing and the back tire's flat, and you're like, I can't ride this. This
Yeah.
isn't a Plymouth.
Yeah. I was riding a bike to my last job. It was awful.
See, my last job in Colorado, I was working at a place called, well, around the Boulder area. I was working at a place called Stone Lighting, and um, I was in transit 4 hours a day, and that included me riding my bike. I had to take my bike from my shop on 75th and Arapahoe. I waited for the bus, and then the bus would take me into Boulder to the bus station, and then the bus station would take me to uh, Louisville, where I worked, and that's where Stone Lighting is. And then once I got to Louisville, where the bus stop drops me off, it's still 2 miles from there to work, which is the reason that I took the bike. Because if I didn't take the bike, that would have added an extra 30 minutes to my round trip, or 30 minutes there and 30 minutes back. That's an extra hour round trip, you know? So that
Right. That's
turns
yeah.
it turns an 8 hour day into a 12-hour day, and having a bike made it so that it was just a 12-hour day instead of 13.
Yeah.
I ended up hurting my back
So
though. Go ahead.
how's how's the lady that you're living with now? Is she treat you good?
Oh yeah, she was wonderful. She well, she already knew I was autistic. Her ex was he had Asperger's, and he's a lot like me. But she
Good. So
already knew what to expect.
I'm glad you found someone that can understand you and will and is gonna listen to you and care. You need that.
Well, she doesn't really have the time to listen. There's a lot of different forms of autism, a lot of different quirks that people have, and like when you're overwhelmed and in a situation like she's in, it's not easy to get individual care for somebody else. So like for me, I feel more like a burden here than anything else. And she doesn't treat me like a burden, but at the same time, like I'm eating her food.
Oh, don't feel that. You know, she wants to help you.
She does. And I eat her food because she asks me to. She wants to make sure I'm eating.
You need to be eating. I help too with whatever I can.
Well, I don't know. I'd like to get all you guys coordinating with each other because like a lot of people are paranoid because of all the stuff that we've all gone through over what happened to Natalie. You know, I mean all of this
Yeah.
Facebook crap. And as a result, nearly everybody that I'm working with is too paranoid to even talk to anybody else I'm working with.
Well, I will. I won't be paranoid. I'll do whatever.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to compile a list tonight so that I can get that done. Um
Good.
I
My
don't know.
ouch. My boyfriend he he wants to uh he wants to do what he can to help you too. He just added you on Facebook a couple minutes ago.
Well, I'll have to get off the phone with you in order to get on and do that. But
Oh, that's fine. But yeah, me and him have been wanting to go and get out of Maryland really anyway. So when I know he'll be completely with me coming out there. I mean, I want to get out of Maryland so bad. It's just this is such a bad area for me. There's so much sadness and pain here. I'm ready to get out of here.
well, I want you to be somewhere safe, and that right there doesn't sound like a safe place to be with all that heroin going on. Problem is, heroin's
It's
everywhere now.
it is, and you know I've been clean for a while, and I don't want to being around here. It just always it's a constant reminder.
It is. That's why I stopped smoking weed when I went to Virginia. I mean, for people who are trying to stay sober, to be around people who aren't sober, it doesn't even have to be the same substance. I mean, I know a lot
Exactly.
of meth heads who relapsed because they went to stay with their mom who's still an alcoholic.
Yep, that's how it happens, and unfortunately, you can't find a friend out here that's sober. Everybody uses something.
That's a lot of the major issue I had in Colorado. A lot of the people that I was friends with, I mean, they all have addictions to feed, and Like that's the priority for them. Like with Natalie and Alicia, for them, it's their addictions aren't choices that I made, but all of this came about because of those addictions. I mean, me
Exactly.
and Natalie
Addiction
were
just
friends.
I hate it. It's ruined my life. It's ruined my family. It's ruined everything.
Well, another thing to be said about heroin, though, like a lot of the people that I know that later on in life, they're like, I finally got off this stuff, and I finally decided I wanted to make my life better. And really, for most of them, they were having the time of their life while they were on drugs. The only real issue they had
Oh,
with it was how much their family treated them like shit for it.
yeah,
Like
it's
they
fun
felt
while you're
good while they
doing
were
it.
on it.
It's a party then, but when you don't, when you don't have any, then that's when the fucking reality sets in.
Yep, the reality of stealing your parents' fucking tools.
Oh, I know. My brother just a couple months ago, my brother broke into my parents' room because they have it all locked up because of us using drugs before. And my brother fucking took a hammer and knives and paper clips and tried busting. Broke the door frame off. It was awful.
So you're getting what I'm saying. There's a lot of people down here who, most of the people who are sticking up for me are people who have been through it, who don't have family, or they have family like mine, family that'll really steal the shirt off your back. And
Wow.
then you got people who, don't have to live that, who are like, you're just making excuses. That's the story I was telling you about, the kid who's getting beaten up at school, and that guy's suggestion, he's like, well, you can always do something else. There's always a solution. You can go to a different school, or you can do this, or you can do that. And it's all stuff where you're literally dependent upon someone else. You literally, as a child, are dependent on your parents to be willing to do
Yeah,
those
and
things.
unfortunately for most children, most of these children have shitty parents.
Yep, and even if they don't have shitty parents, they're not raised by their parents because their parents are too busy working to try to keep a roof over their head and food in their belly, so they're raised by the other kids in school. And those kids who they're being raised with in school, the ones who are raised with their parents, it's usually because their parents a drug dealer. So then
Exactly.
basically,
When my son was growing up, my son's 8 now, but during his toddler years, from probably a year old till 4, I was working 2 jobs and going to college full time. I missed so much, and it's not fair.
that is some really important developmental years of their life too. Like up until the age of 6, that's about how long you have to try to get them a foundation in understanding foreign languages. They don't have to be able to speak it, but if you speak French around a child or Spanish or whatever, a lot of the stuff that they're going to learn that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives, they learn at that point. So a lot of the bias that society teaches, we start teaching as soon as somebody's born. We watch these cartoons where the good guys are all good looking and all the bad guys look like Skeletor.
Yep, my dad was in a biker gang my whole life. He was the president when I was little, and it brought a lot of sketchy people around. And my dad taught me and my brothers to be racist, and I never was because I knew it. I knew that was wrong. It's My dad tried to teach us awful fucking thing. My dad praises Hitler, and it's terrible.
So you know all about Clubhouse girls.
Oh yes, absolutely. My mom was one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Me and my mother, I will never. I don't even call her my mother. I don't know what she is, but she's not a mother.
That's where I'm at with mine. I do call her my mom now just so that people know who I'm talking about. But for a lot of years, I didn't call her my mom. I called her Angela. And I didn't talk
Yep,
to
that's
her.
what I call my mom. I call her Donna because she's never been a mom to me. She's fucking evil. She has on her ass. She has property of my dad on there. Like, yeah, yeah. She has property of, and then she has my dad's clubhouse name.
Yep. See, that's something that I was always afraid of with Natalie and Alicia growing up in that. I mean,
So
I didn't,
was her dad in a biker gang?
I honestly, I didn't know anything about the biker stuff with her family until I left Virginia. Everything that I learned about that, I learned from Pierre, who is a mutual friend. He actually didn't have
Wow.
anything nice to say about Natalie, though. He said she was evil, and he asked me which officer he needed to make a report to, and then he blocked me on Facebook. Like, okay. But a lot of the people who were trying to help, I ended up getting either they were separated from me on Facebook, like it's almost like somebody was getting into my Facebook and deleting anybody who was actually trying to help, or destroying their electronic information. And maybe it just happens that all of these
They
people
could
had these
have.
issues at
I
once,
think they
but
probably did.
I believe it. With the number of people who lost all of their pictures because they were saving screenshots for me, and the number of people who their messenger stopped working, like within minutes of them telling me that they wanted to help me, like it's not something
That's
that's
not a
easy.
coincidence.
Well, that's what I had to say too, but then people are like, well, you're paranoid and you're schizophrenic, and I'm like, no, I'm
No,
not.
no,
Well, you
that's
must be,
not.
because that stuff doesn't actually happen to people. It's all in your head. I'm like, okay, that's like saying that Derek Apicata hitting me was all in my head. He did hit me in the head, so I guess that's kind of true.
Well, I believe you. I believe you for sure.
Well, the biggest issue for me is that the people who believe me, most of it is because they've seen a lot of the stuff that I've dealt with online. But I need those people to
Oh,
come
I've
together
seen it. People
and
have been ruthless to you.
indeed. But the other thing is, like, a lot of those Natalie groups, I'm not a part of those groups. I was never allowed to be a part of those groups, so I don't get access to all
I'll
of the
join
stuff.
them if you want me to. I can join them and then I'll start screenshotting.
Well, if you want to, I'm not going to stop you from it. But at this
Oh, I
point,
will then.
the major thing for me is trying to get people coordinated to actually fight back against this, because I can't do it myself. I'm literally not
Well, you can
mentally
count on
capable
me.
anymore. Yes, ma'am. The last time
You
I
really?
talked to you on the phone, I was at I was at a place called Western. It's a gas station in Sydney, Nebraska.
It's been a long time since we talked on the phone.
It has been, but I remember a lot of stuff that most people don't. I remember where I was at for that conversation. I remember where I was at for most of these conversations. I remember things that people said. I remember the lady whose son had his jaw broken. I remembered that. I mean, a lot of these people that said, "Hey, Sean, call me if you need somebody to talk to," and I called them, and it ended up me being the one listening to them.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't do that to you. I'll shut up and you can just vent whenever you need to.
Well, I don't need you to shut up. Actually, the sound of your voice is helpful, and hearing that I'm not the only one who goes through it helps out, and the fact that you're not bullshitting me helps. I mean, with Natalie and I were friends because we had a lot in common. We had abuse in common, and she told me
Yeah,
she
she
loved me a
seems like
lot.
she's been through a lot. Well, that she had been through a lot.
She was my best friend for a reason. Well, most of my friends told me, they were telling me those pretty words like they're gonna fix it, or telling me that I just need to this and I need to that. She was a lot more down to earth about it. She thought about it from a different perspective. But also, there's things like, for her, attention means something different. For her, it means entertainment. Because when that's how she felt as a pretty person, a lot of them end up feeling like they're other people's entertainment, and I didn't need to be entertained. I needed a friend. I didn't
Exactly.
need attention because I needed entertained. I needed attention because I was overwhelmed. Everybody
So
needs to be
what
loved.
caused her to turn on you like that?
Her sister.
Oh, they're identical twins, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's easy to tell the difference between the two of them. Natalie, she has a different look in her eyes, and she also had a tooth that was slightly more forward than the other one. And they also kept their hair different. But like with Natalie and I, when I was in Virginia, um, I was severely dehydrated on my birthday because I'd spent the day in a Walmart or in a McDonald's parking lot. We were supposed to meet up between 11 and noon, and she wasn't able to come out until about 6 o'clock. So I was basically in a
Yeah.
hot parking lot in Virginia for all day. Um, Matter of fact, when a few days later, when the police came and got me, they took me to the hospital, and the first thing they did was hook me up to an IV and start putting fluids in me. But me and Natalie, what made her turn on me is her sister. Like, even when I left Virginia because I didn't want them being afraid. I already knew what her mom was thinking. She had already explained to me how her mom thinks. So, I mean,
What did her mom think?
her mom doesn't think highly of homeless people, and she didn't like the idea of her daughter hanging out with someone as old as me. But she also
So
thought
she's
that I
better than people.
do what?
So her mom thinks she's better than people.
She does think she's better than people. She also has a history of going out with people who are abusive. So when it comes to whether or not a dude is decent or not, she's not the best judge of character, and asking her is probably not the right person to ask. But I got stuck outside of her house. There was a communication issue because of a phone that I had received. It was Natalie's old phone, and it looked like it had been used as target practice. So when I went to her house, tried to talk to her and explain to her that the phone was really fucked up and I was having a tough time, I got stuck out in the road and cars were driving by me honking at me because they're narrowly missing me. So, of course, I laid on the horn and I knew how they were going to take that. I already knew it. But I left there so that they could feel safe. And when it turned out that Natalie was in Colorado, I found out Natalie was in Colorado after I found out she was missing. So, what ended up making everything go south is that I got stuck in the road over a telephone that I didn't want to begin with, but I let Alicia talk me into taking the phone because it was really important to her. And it destroyed my entire life. Like, that phone, if it hadn't been for that phone, we would have never had an issue.
I thought Alicia was friends with you too.
They were friends with me until I got my car stuck outside of their house. Now,
And then
Alicia,
Alicia talked Natalie into turning on you.
no, see, Alicia had her own ideas, right? And she was really mean to me before I got my car stuck outside of their house. Matter of fact, she was the major contributor to it. Because, first of all, that phone was trash. And second of all, she was typing some really mean shit at me that, like, that's not who I am, and I don't deserve to take the abuse because you get something wrong in your head. Like, I have a broken phone. I'm sorry that I can't explain that with the broken phone because you won't answer the phone. So I end up texting it, and it won't text what it is that I'm typing. So I literally can't do anything except be abused. And Natalie said that she was going to talk to me on Monday. I just didn't make it to Monday because I was busy having a panic attack for like 5 days straight. I ended up not sleeping for 7 days straight overall. And because she doesn't
How
have,
long did you guys? How long were you guys friends?
um, about a year. Not quite a year. I mean, we didn't really.
How did you meet her again?
She was selling drugs for her dad when she was 13, but we didn't really hang out. Like, we hung out in the same area, but that's not the same as, like, this is my good buddy and we go hanging out and doing stuff together. It was more of a, there's Derek Parrish. I hang out with him. He's 18. His mom is with him. I'm hanging out with them, and she's hanging out with Maddie, and Maddie is friends with them. I think I just lost the call.